think it's recording. Okay. Hi, Kelly. Thanks for talking with me today. It was wonderful to talk to you like about a couple of weeks ago. And I said, well, damn, we didn't record this conversation. So here we're recording it because I wanted to really capture what you told me, your experience as well as a cop, and then now as a wellness instructor for cops and first responders. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So Kelly has served in Oakland PD for 10 years as a patrol officer and 5 years before that as a technician. Is that right?
Correct.
And now she is a wellness and yoga instructor for first responders, as well as active military and veterans. So yeah, we can start, Kelly, from your experiences as a cop. Can you tell us a little bit about the stress of being in patrol?
It's so constant, and I read once that the insidiousness of chronic stress is that it starts to become normal. And so I think that was a huge thing in my case. I started to feel that my hypervigilance was normal, my lack of sleep was absolutely normal. These were all just parts of the job, and
Um,
never really understanding that, living up here was going to have these detrimental effects on my mental and physical health later. So I think there, on my end, a real lack of tools to self-regulate, to recognize stress, because you are just riding the highs and lows of your nervous system all day long, and then you are getting off shift and wondering why you can't sleep, or feeling anxious, again, hypervigilant, or falling asleep only to wake up a few minutes later, and then repeating that cycle until it's time to get up.
okay.
So really just, again, riding the highs and lows of your nervous system, and never really coming back to balance before
Mhm.
you're spiking again. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's just, yeah, in Oakland, just because it's so busy, and the department is pretty short staffed, you are just going from call to call. So there's never really time
yeah,
to, sit, decompress, and you just run on that adrenaline for
yeah.
the entirety of your shift.
And you're really talking about really the day to day, right? You're not talking about just one big traumatic event that, kind of pushed you to that no sleep zone. You're talking about extended periods of being on the call, being active, hypervigilant.
I think it's a mixture of all of that.
Okay.
I think it was the loss of many friends, either due to their own hands, or four that were murdered by a parolee. And that combined just with the chronic stress of every single day, dealing with serious calls, loss of life, and just running from one call to the next, and never really catching your breath, and
Yeah.
then trying to adjust to home life, and it's time to decompress and go to sleep, and you just can't. I didn't have the tools and really the self-awareness to realize that I could live a different way,
Yeah.
that I could simply use my breath to bring my system back into balance, to engage my parasympathetic nervous system so that I could rest, so that I could repair. But
Yeah.
I didn't even realize it was a problem until much later, until after I was retired out.
You retired out. Okay, so you actually noticed this after you retired.
Correct.
Oh, interesting. Tell us a bit more about that. And yeah, like does that have anything to do with you retiring? At what point did you say, I'm not going to do this anymore, or like I could live a better life? What?
It's I was retired out due to a physical injury.
Okay.
And within a year of being retired out, life slowed down so significantly, and life got very quiet. So I started to notice these things about myself, like I'm chronically on alert.
Mm-hmm.
I'm anxious, I'm irritable, I'm impatient. And I think what really affected me most was the inability to sleep.
Okay.
So again, within that year, my sleep went from maybe 5 hours on the high side to maybe 3 hours, and I was just utterly exhausted to the point where I could not take it anymore. And I wound up going to a doctor, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. But
Okay.
again, it wasn't until life slowed down,
Yeah.
and that took again almost a full year until I recognized the signs that really something was wrong. Had I not been retired out, I think I would have kept in that cycle.
Yeah, that's the crazy part.
Hmm.
That's what I think a lot of cops are going through, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Without a physical injury. Yeah.
I think it sustained you, and I believe I lived on, just adrenaline and caffeine and a lot of sugar for years. And I truly think I would have continued that cycle until I eventually retired out or had a stroke or a heart attack.
Yeah, yeah. That's so in that sense, your physical injury was a bit of a blessing.
In disguise, for sure.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
it's yeah, the culmination of, so many things that, set me on this trajectory of, yoga and wellness that I didn't expect to be on at all, but wound up saving my life in the end.
Yeah, that's crazy. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that because in when we talked, you said yoga saved me. So at what point, when you got diagnosed with PTSD and you're having issues with sleep, what did you seek? How what kind of things you tried and what kind of help you seek?
I talked to a therapist. I experienced EMDR. All of that was helpful, but there was
Mm.
something that yoga was able to do for me because I had such a hard time articulating what was going on. There was something so much deeper that language really couldn't touch it.
Mm.
And I found in yoga practice and primarily breath work and mindfulness meditation, I was really able to process things so much better than I was with any talk therapy or EMDR. But what actually led me to this experience was seeking out a yoga therapeutics class for my physical injury in hopes of regaining some mobility and flexibility in my
Mm.
shoulder because I was having such a hard time even moving it in any direction. So
Mm.
I went to this yoga class specific for injuries. And initially, I was so resistant to any of the breath work, any of the mindfulness or meditation. I resisted it. I would close my eyes and make my grocery list. But over time, I stopped trying to fight it and actually practiced it. And it was so incredibly helpful. It wasn't immediate, but I found that the effects of that practice started to sort of sneak up on me. And I noticed those effects by what was missing. And what was missing was that constant hum of anxiety or irritation or hypervigilance. So I started to notice I felt all of those things less and less. I was sleeping better. I was feeling better. I was no longer gritting my back teeth to dust. I wasn't just, a live wire all the time. Um, and I eventually just became this yoga evangelist trying to tell people like these tools that we can use, just our breath work makes such a huge difference. And I couldn't believe that nothing like this was taught in the academy. Like just these tools for self regulation, if nothing more than breath work. So
Yeah.
I decided I wanted to teach. The
Yeah.
next year I went to a yoga teacher training and off I went.
That's incredible. So that's really interesting when you say, I close my eyes and do my grocery list. I actually identify with that a lot.
Yes. I
And
felt terrible because they were beautiful breathwork practices, but no, I was very resistant.
yeah, and I think part of it is resistance, but also part of it is just your nervous system being unable to slow down in that moment. I mean, you have so much residual stress, it's like a wave, it's like pushing you in that one direction. It doesn't just die overnight. You have to kind of
Absolutely.
ride it out and keep your practice. And I always say this, you can't expect a single breathwork session or a single yoga session to just change your trajectory if you have accumulated, so much residual stress.
Mhm.
So I think that's part of it too. It just takes time for it's like a brain just, you know, is used to being that hyperactive and
Mhm.
thinking and planning and all of a sudden you don't have anything to plan, but it's still like going
Yes,
until.
yes, it's incredible. But I also think I was under the impression that I needed to sit down on a meditation cushion for an
Yeah.
extended period of time
Mhm.
to feel any benefits, to make any difference. And it, when I started to realize, no, I can integrate these breath practices throughout my day and shift from a very stressful state into this parasympathetic state where I'm calm, I'm focused, I'm collected and balanced. And I
Yeah.
have that. I have that ability to do that on my own. So that was, such a revelation for me because I really thought, I needed to do all of these things and, sit and focus, and there's so many different practices, and I think I mentioned previously that if this idea had been brought to me when I was in the academy,
Yeah.
I would have eye rolled and sighed so forcefully, wouldn't have had to dust that room for a week. I just would not have embraced it. But having experienced it and knowing the science behind it, I love to come across that resistance, to talk to people like this is actually, there's so much more to it. It doesn't have to be a woo woo practice. There's yoga, every kind of yoga for everybody. There's every kind of breath practice for everybody.
Yeah. And now you're teaching cops these practices. So tell me a bit about that, and how do you, what, in your opinion, what's the best way to introduce it so that they don't roll their eyes and, just because that's a challenge, right?
Of
In the
course.
wellness industry for cops is the adoption is quite difficult, and how you present it. I've heard many things, many people tell me you just have to call it tactical, call it tactical breathing, call it tactical meditation or whatever. And I laugh at it. There's truth in it, of course, but hopefully we want to do something a little bit more deeper than that. So how do you in your classes introduce, what do you tell cops? You tell your own story. How do you get them to buy in, and if they don't, like what happens?
I usually do start off with my own story, and I talk about that very instance of if this has been brought to me years ago, I would not have wanted any part of it at all.
Mhm.
I probably would have, again, done my grocery list for the entirety of the training. But I do talk about my story. I talk about the evidence, the research, all of these things. It's backed by science. And,
Yeah.
I'm not going to require you to hold hands or do anything weird. I'm just going to teach you some practices and then, guiding through a breath practice just so someone might be able to notice that they're breathing high up into their chest, exacerbating their stress response. So just sort of noticing and building that self-awareness. So I think that's
Yeah.
been a really beneficial way to, uncross, to get people to uncross their arms and maybe, you know, uh, take a few moments just to listen and
Yeah.
be open to the idea that there are these wonderful tools for self-regulation to help you ride out the entirety of your career, without winding up with some kind of chronic condition, disease, or high blood pressure,
Yeah.
um, coronary heart disease. So many different things that we wind up as those who work in law enforcement wind up having.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that has been really helpful. And
Mm-hmm.
luckily, a lot of departments are already pretty open to it.
Mm-hmm. Those tides are shifting, right?
Yeah, tides are shifting. And it's surprising how um, receptive a lot of the officers are who actually do come to classes. So
That's
that's been really nice. And how much it has been helpful to them when they can use a breath practice when they're in their patrol car, realizing that they don't, again, have to sit down, make it a huge ordeal.
yeah.
You can do it while you're driving.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, how you present it, and also just I think there's the pure education of how these things work.
Right.
In my experience, has been really eye-opening for a lot of the officers. They're like, "Oh, I had no idea." When you talk about the nervous system and how your decisions are being, biased by the nervous, like everything is in your brain. And so, and then there's these two arms of the nervous system that are, sympathetic, the activating, and the relaxing, parasympathetic, and when you actually educate them, I think about this is all your body and your mind. This is not just some external thing that is being pushed upon you.
Mhm,
Your own self-control of your own nervous system so you can make the best decision because these things are literally connected. Like
mhm,
they're literally neurons that from your breathing centers in the brain that connect to the anxiety centers that connect to the decision-making centers in a matter of seconds
mhm,
impair you. And I've found that to be very beneficial to because I think cops do like not the not the scientific jargon per se, but like actually this is a physical thing, the
mhm,
physicality. It's not a woo-woo thing, it's a physical um thing, just like your other physical skills like firearms. This is something else you need to know
mhm.
in your career. Yeah, so I wonder, have you experienced any resistance? I have personally experienced more resistance from more experienced officers than younger officers. The younger officers I found to be more receptive to these practices. Maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe it's just not being on the job
Mhm, mhm.
thing enough. But what have you experienced any resistance? Have you seen any differences between generations?
It's interesting because I've found it to be a mix. A
Mhm.
lot of the older generation have been so receptive because they are tired,
Yeah,
right?
they
They're
need it.
just mentally and physically tired. So anything to help,
Mhm.
um, they welcome it. I think if I've encountered resistance, it has been a little more from the younger generation because
Really?
they don't realize how much they need it. And
Yeah.
because it is so early on, they haven't really um, been on the receiving end of those, you know,
Yeah.
disastrous effects of living with chronic stress.
Yeah.
But my hope is, even if the practices, tools that I impart don't resonate with them that day, they will have them in their back pocket for when they do need them.
Absolutely.
So, and I try and explain that as well. If this may not resonate with you today at all, it probably wouldn't have with me. But at
Yeah.
least, when you're waking up at 2 a.m. and you can't get back to sleep, I've left you with a progressive muscle relaxation
Yeah.
so that you might be able to loosen up some tension in the body, hopefully shift into the parasympathetic state, enable yourself to get back to sleep, give your mind something to attach to so it's not just cycling.
Yeah.
But again, I think it also takes getting into these departments, which is hard because it's almost impossible to find a time that so many officers and admin staff can take a class, can come to a workshop. So that's another thing, just being able to hit different shifts. It's not easy at all.
Hmm.
Um, it's far easier to maybe do recordings and have them on hand for patrol because a lot of them are never going to be able to come to a class unless it's on their off day. And a lot of officers live quite far away from the department and aren't, aren't not able to drive a long distance to come to the department for a workshop on an off day.
Yeah, that's the challenge, right?
For
To
sure.
fit it into the time schedules of the officers. So you think that I will ask you about your classes, but before you think that recording and giving them as a available when you're on time would work, would be beneficial? Recording the practices and
Say that again, Melissa. I lost you.
oh, sorry,
Say that one more time. I lost you.
a little bit
That's okay.
choppy. Um, So I was saying definitely a challenge to try to bring them to the class because of the crazy schedules. Uh,
Mhm.
but do you think distributing these tools digitally would be a solution to that? Like if you give them a recorded version or
I think it would help.
yeah,
I also think some officers are not ever going to walk into your class. Just period. They're not going to do it. But having a recording that they can use absolutely anytime
anonymously,
I
right?
think is beneficial. I
Mhm.
also think trying to get these trainings, to get these classes in when people are just starting out, like in the academy, is a wonderful way to get people started.
Yeah,
Also, for advanced officer school, when they have their training and you have sort of a captive audience for a week, is
yeah,
another way to get people started. But just to leave them with some tools. Some again may continue on it as a practice and some may never. But
yeah.
at the same time, at least having that opportunity to get the training and to have them understand that you have these tools, you possess these tools already, but just taking the time and knowing that they are beneficial, not to just try them out when you're in crisis, but start to build up a practice slowly, a few minutes at a time, utilizing your breath per se to
Hmm.
regulate your nervous system will go so far.
So far, yeah.
Mhm.
So tell us a little bit about what is a Kelly Parker Bridges class look like? If I were to join one of your classes this month, and I'm sure you have many different types, but I want to learn a little bit about the content. What do you teach? How long? And what kind of practices do you teach?
It varies so much for San Jose PD. We typically do a, I want to say sort of a workshopy type class, just
Hmm.
depending on what they need. We might do an entire hour of nothing but a session on back care. We might do an entire hour on practices, yoga practices for sleep.
Hmm.
We might do an entire hour on myofascial release and stretching. So every class looks quite different. They rotate with their content. So
Hmm.
really, it just depends on what they need. If they need an entire hour of neck and shoulders, we will do an entire hour on neck and shoulders. But it
Okay.
always includes some mindfulness meditation, breath work for stress management.
Hmm.
I teach for the War Related Illness and Injury Study Center, yoga for chronic pain. So it's typically in the chair. I have a lot of um, veterans who are dealing with chronic pain, lots of injuries. So, again, a seated practice that's very slow. Um, I teach for active wellness, which was Fireflex Yoga at San Bruno Fire. Same thing, just depends on what they need. I
Hmm.
may prepare a class thinking that that's what I'm going to teach, and I get to the station and they haven't slept. So our practice might mean we put our legs up the wall and do yoga nidra for 59 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, it all varies, just depending on who's in front of me and what they need.
Yeah. You did. So for those that might not be familiar with Yoga Nidra, can you tell us a little bit about Yoga Nidra?
I can. It's this wonderful guided meditation practice that um, about 20 minutes of it, they say through research, is the equivalent of about 2 hours of sleep.
Mm.
So it's a wonderful practice if you are unable to sleep. There
Yeah.
are many recordings you can find on, I believe it's Insight Timer for free. So if you are having trouble sleeping, I would highly suggest it. It's another practice that I was so resistant to. One of my very best friends is a retired detective out of Arizona who's an iRest yoga teacher. And she led us through a practice. And it was the first time, again, that I paid any attention and was led on the practice. And after 20 minutes, I felt more rested than I had in so long. So then I sought out that training as well. So, highly recommend it if you're not sleeping. But find somebody whose voice resonates with you, whose cadence, and it might take a minute, but it's well worth looking into.
Hmm. Okay, thank you. Um, and I do want to ask you also, when we chatted a few weeks ago, I told you about Neurosmart and what we're doing, and you said if I had that, when I was a cop, I would have jumped onto it or something like along those lines.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about what you meant, and why do you think, tools like Neurosmart would be useful for cops that are in service?
I think in my case, just being able to recognize the signs of my own stress response would have been so incredibly helpful. And I know I mentioned it would have saved me from gritting my teeth to absolute dust because I didn't know how stressed I actually was. Again, I thought it was completely normal. So learning about my stress response, understanding my stress response, and then finding out about tools to shift me out of that high stress state and back into balance so that I could function better, perform better, and probably again write out my career without having some serious mental and physical effects from
Mhm.
that stress. So yes, I would have been all over it. Again, I probably would have thought initially, like, why on earth are we doing this? Because I didn't know, about the stress response. I really didn't understand it very well at all.
Right.
So I think it could save lives. I think it could educate people on what's going on within themselves and how to bring themselves back into homeostasis when they find themselves very keyed up, very hyper vigilant, very over the top with their stress response.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we keep saying is people say, I know I'm stressed. Why do I need, a device to tell me that? But I say I disagree because a lot of the times when we are stressed, we don't know. We can feel tight and we can feel stressed, but exactly how over the limit we are, how much, and what do we need to get back? Because again, stress messes up that communication between the body and the mind to the point that you normalize these
Right.
feelings and you normalize ignoring them as well, so that you don't really know why that you're stressed. You have a vague idea, but you don't understand the sacrifices your body's doing on a daily basis to keep you awake, keep you on the job, until you have something to actually objectively measure it.
Hmm.
So I think that that piece is probably the most helpful about what we're doing is to bring the awareness for first and foremost, break that cycle of no, I'm fine, or like, I'll be tough and work through it and stuff like that. We have to at some point be aware what that's doing. And a lot of the times they get really surprised when they see their data. Um, just be like, oh, like I didn't know how off I was. Like
Yeah.
your experience.
It's like I said, it blew my mind when I was retired out and I had time to decompress
Right.
everything that was bubbling under the surface that I just stuffed down to keep going and going and going. And like I said, I would have lived like that until probably I had a stroke.
Yeah, yeah,
Because yes, it did become normal for me.
yeah. And a lot of the cops, of course, don't have that hidden blessing, a blessing in disguise to take that 1 year off
Right.
and to be able to.
And
It does take time, right?
I'm
Uh,
sorry.
it does take time, even if they
Right.
did take. It's not like a vacation thing. I always say, no, the vacation that you take is not going to be enough, or that 1 week off, 2 week off is not going to be enough to bring the awareness back because you're.
Hmm.
So you had that opportunity, but a lot of cops don't. And so, yeah, I mean, I do strongly believe, obviously, that we need to educate more on how the stress response is impacting the officers in a long-term chronic.
I wholeheartedly agree. And my hope is eventually this will be offered as a training at every academy. And if not at the academy, then advanced officer school, again, where we have this captive audience of officers and to help better educate about their own stress response and the the long-lasting effects of ignoring that stress response.
Mm. Well, I agree 100%, and I'm very hopeful that we're making a lot of good progress, us and of course people like you, and I'm very happy to now have some opportunities to maybe work with you. So maybe we can talk about that next time as well.
I would
Uh,
love to.
yeah, I'll thank you for your time again, chatting with me, Kelly. And yeah, I'll talk to you again very soon.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
All right, so I'm just gonna stop this recording.